All right, guys, so we're going to get started. Just in the interest of time, I know it's only an hour, so I want to make sure we get as much question and answer time in as possible. So I'm just going to give a quick introduction. So my name is Brianne Morrison. I'm the Special Projects Consultant for the Service Learning Office, and I put this forum together because I figured this is a really important opportunity for you guys to get involved in the civic life of Pittsfield. So if anybody's interested in finding out more, so feel free to go on and like that. So I'm going to introduce our candidates. The first is Linda Tyer. Linda graduated from Bay Path College, where she stayed in that Boston area and worked as a paralegal. She then moved from working in Boston to a law firm in Pittsfield, where she, after that, worked in special ed in the Lennox schools. She served as city councilor, and she is the current city clerk. And we have Mayor Dan Bianchi, who graduated from UMass Amherst. He spent time in the Army National Guard. He has served as the Director of Administration and Finance for Pittsfield, as well as the City Councilor, and he also sits on the West Side Initiative Steering Committee. How this is going to go down is each candidate is going to get 2 minutes to answer a question. The questions I gathered from students on campus. I went around and I asked students what you guys wanted to bring up, what you guys cared about, and I got the most popular topics I grabbed from that. And at the end, I only have a few questions, so after that, it'll be open to you guys. So we'll go with that, and I'm timing them on my cell phone. So usher into the 21st century. So we'll start with Linda, and then question will move over to Mayor Bianchi. So BCC recognizes that hunger and food security is a threat to our students' well-being. This semester, the college opened up a food pantry to provide for students, and as a side note, if anyone ever needs anything from the food pantry, it's just right on the other side of this wall at the top of the cafeteria stairs. And it's open most days. So if you or anyone else you need, you know anything in need, you can go there. As mayor, what will you do to provide food security to Pittsfield residents?
This is a great question, and certainly a challenge that we experience here in the city of Pittsfield. I think one of the things that we struggle with is conditions of poverty and disadvantage in some of our neighborhoods, and in some of our families struggle for economic prosperity. And food insecurity is an important aspect of anyone's ability to thrive successfully in their community, and especially when it comes to young children who arrive at school and they're hungry and they've come from an environment where there isn't a lot of stability, and they may be tired from lack of sleep, and there's lack of structure in their home. And the most important thing that we can do as a community, and the basic thing, is to provide access to food. And the city of Pittsfield now, through its public schools, is eligible for a federal program that allows us to feed all of our elementary school kids for breakfast and lunch. And while that is an important basic life sustaining measure, and it is important for kids when they are starting their school day to be fed and be prepared and have the energy that they need to learn, the underlying issues of poverty are an important part of what we need to begin addressing here in the city of Pittsfield. Thank you, Brianna.
Excellent. And Mayor Bianchi, same question.
Thank you very much. This year we did expand the feeding program in the school system so that our youngsters who are involved in the summer program, or anybody who actually wanted to be fed, could be fed breakfast and lunch. And we're talking about the possibility of applying for a grant that it will allow us to have youngsters even get a dinner meal. Because we are finding that there are many families who oftentimes miss a meal, and that's unfortunate. The most important thing you can do is nourish a young child, and I see these kids, even though their day doesn't start until 8:30, coming up to Crosby, going into the community schools to get a good breakfast. And I know people criticize and say, well, that should be done at home. But if it isn't, I think it's important for us to safeguard against a child not being fed. Now, also, we have a network. My church, for example, is part of it, and we have a food pantry. And on Fridays, people come there, and those folks who are in need of food will get a grocery bag or two filled with foods. And there are also other churches in the area that do the same thing. So we really have to have a good network to safeguard people against hunger for a variety objective reasons. Now, on a broader scale, I really think that, and if you talk to people who are involved in this mission, I think as a region, as a community, we have to think about what would happen in the future if we needed food in this area and there was not access to food from outside the area. One of the neat things that we did this year was to start a chestnut grove. Now, chestnuts were the basic staple during the 18th century. We started a chestnut grove to proliferate the spread of chestnut trees throughout New England. In the city of Detroit,
sorry to interrupt. Oops, sorry.
Okay, but in the city of Detroit, one of the growing industries is agriculture, which is hard to believe. But we could do that here in the city of Pittsfield and Berkshires with all of the open land that we have.
Excellent. And now, so the second question is, Burlington, Vermont, which is a city relatively similar in size to Pittsfield, has made a goal to have 90% of their electricity come from renewable energy by 2050. Would you make this a goal for Pittsfield, Mayor Bianchi? And if so, how would you make it easy and accessible for public participation?
Okay, and I just want to get a point of clarification. When you say, what would the city of Pittsfield do, are you talking about just the city, the municipality, or the entire city itself, including all of its residents?
The entire city itself.
Okay, great. Excellent question. And a wonderful approach. I have asked the people in our community development office to pursue what's called an aggregation program, whereby everybody in the city could buy their electricity from one supply source. And this aggregation program would include residents, but it would also include small commercial properties as well. They could aggregate and choose to be part of this project, or they could opt out. But one of the stipulations is we could stipulate when we go out and when the aggregator goes out to request bids, they can request that the only thing they will consider will be green energy. So we could literally, within a matter of a year or 2 years, have 90% or even more of all of the energy that's being generated somewhere be either hydropower, solar, or wind. So you can actually buy 100% green energy if you choose to, and you could do it through an aggregation process like that. So I think that that's kind of an exciting concept. Typically, it's a little bit more expensive, but if the community is really focused on green energy, this is the easiest approach to make sure that the energy coming into the city of Pittsfield is green.
Excellent. Thank you. And Linda?
Thank you. I think that for any future generation, the commitment that we need to make for renewable energies and walking back away from fossil fuels is an important aspect of any emerging modern community. And I think that when you're running for mayor, your responsibility is to the municipal government that you lead. And I think as a leader in municipal government, we have to begin at our municipal level. And there's opportunities within government for us to be better at being efficient with our own energy and being able to lower costs for that. And there's some really creative things that municipalities are doing. For example, in the city of Pittsfield, the municipal government has a lot of municipal buildings and acres of rooftop. So the opportunities for putting solar panels on our municipal buildings, or even a simple thing like painting your rooftops white to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, is one of the steps that we can take as a municipal government to be a leader in how we provide for more efficient energy and renewable resources. One of the things that I'm interested in exploring is the mayor's initiative for climate change, which is being led by former Mayor Michael Bloomberg from New York City. There are a number of cities that have joined this initiative, and this is something that I think the city of Pittsfield should begin exploring. So hopefully we can take advantage of solar and wind and hydro as part of our future. We currently have 2 solar fields, one that has yet to be constructed, and hopefully that will begin a trend towards this new energy efficiency community that I think your generation is most interested in seeing your leadership doing. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, that was great. And the third question, Linda, most of our students are in the young adult category demographic. Last month, Berkshire's published an article saying the top list of reasons why young people leave the Berkshires are jobs. 60% of the respondents listed a better paying job as the reason why they left, and 54% of those respondents also listed as the work I want to do isn't available or there are no advancements available in my career. If you're elected mayor, what will you do to bring jobs to Pittsfield residents?
This is a great question, especially for young professionals and students like you who are planning your future careers. The next exciting evolution for job creation in the city of Pittsfield is focusing on the creative economy and the knowledge economy. These are important areas of growth, and one of the things that we need in terms of inspiring that kind of economic growth is to ensure that we have broadband access in our business parks, our commercial centers, and in our educational institutions. And one of the things that I want to make clear about the creative economy is oftentimes people think about that as being theater, art, music, and literature. But the creative economy includes really exciting jobs in architecture and engineering, design, film, and media. These are areas that of the creative economy that I think the Berkshires in particular is especially well suited to. And the important thing about the creative economy and the knowledge economy is that when we want to attract new young professionals or students like yourselves who are planning for your future, the most important thing we can do for you is have a people climate. Business-friendly climate is important for any kind of economic development plan, but people in these creative economies and knowledge economies want to live in a place that's interesting. And I think the Berkshires is an interesting place to live. We have great art and culture here, a beautiful natural environment, and Pittsfield has now become part of what is long known as the Berkshire art and culture scene. That makes us an interesting place to live, and that is where we can really accelerate our future economic development and create jobs.
Excellent. And Mayor Bianchi?
Well, thank you very much. Well, we do have a dynamic cultural and art scene here in Berkshire County. Having said that, we still have kids that leave. We graduate about 400 kids out of our high schools every year, and invariably many of them go off to other places. Now, we're not going to be able to offer something for everyone. The question asks, what about those kids who can't find something? I have a son, by the way, who graduated with a degree in sports management. Well, there aren't any sports teams where he could earn a living here, but he moved to Boston. He works for the Boston Red Sox. So you have to assume that there are a certain number of kids who are going to leave. However, having said that, I think that we have to create a dynamic educational system, and that's why I've pushed so hard for a new Taconic High School with 21st century curriculum that is going to focus kids on the jobs that are here so that they can get an education, maybe machine technology, so that they could go into the one of the many advanced manufacturing companies that are already here that are doing great things. But you can't stop there, and that's why we've partnered with Berkshire Community College to develop a curriculum that matches up with the college. And I've been pushing for, and we will make a reality, the Berkshire Innovation Center. That Innovation Center will have bring together research institutions such as, and they've already signed up, the Nanotechnology Center in Albany, RPI, for those of you who want to be electrical engineers, also the two UMass campuses, Amherst and Lowell, two of the premier polymer science institutions in the country. They're part of this innovation center. This is going to give the small and medium-sized companies that are already here, that are doing high-tech and advanced manufacturing, the ability to grow. That's going to offer an opportunity for young people who are studying machine technology, engineering, or other endeavors to be gainfully employed here in the city.
Wonderful. Next question, Mayor Bianchi. Many of our students rely on the bus for transportation. They've criticized the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority for not running on Sundays and for a seriously lacking Saturday schedule. What will you do as mayor to make Pittsfield public transportation more available and reliable?
Yeah, it's a problem all over, and it's something that I've discussed with the governor. I've discussed it with the president of the Massachusetts Senate. There has to be more funding for transportation. We have a terrific bus system, but it runs like everything else on funding and money. So it's critical that our legislators push to add funding, and I've voiced this at every forum. I've voiced this with our local delegation. I've voiced it with our federal delegation. We have to increase money for transportation, and it's not just for students. We have a lot of people who do live in poverty, who may have a job in South County, but how do you get there on Sunday? For you students, and for those students that have to take a night course, how do you get home after 7 o'clock at night? So it's incumbent upon us to put the pressure that we can on our state legislature to increase funding so that we can expand the routes and make it more available to not just students, but people who can't afford a car, who can't afford transportation to work. Critical, especially out here in the Berkshires.
And Linda?
One of the important access points for addressing transportation is that the City of Pittsfield has a position on the Berkshire Regional Transportation Authority's board, and it is a weighted position based upon our population. And I believe that with the right sort of engagement with the Berkshire Regional Transportation System, that the City of Pittsfield can begin to engage in problem solving and finding solutions for the gaps that exist in regional transportation. Certainly, funding is part of it. However, they're doing some creative things at Berkshire Regional Transportation Center. They've scaled down the size of their buses so that they're more energy efficient, and that is an important aspect to a prior question about how do we become more environmentally sustainable. I think we have to constantly be assessing the bus routes and the needs of our community. I know that last night, for example, we had a debate here at the college, and students who may have wanted to participate who don't have their own vehicle, or even people in the community who want to participate, couldn't get public transportation out here in the evenings. I think that the issue of poverty and access to transportation is a critical one. There are 1,700 jobs available right now in Berkshire County, and all of those jobs ranging from hospitality and tourism jobs right up to engineering jobs at General Dynamics. So we need to make those jobs accessible to people who are living in poverty, who are maybe in the working class community, so that they can have access to these jobs that are available. So I think that as the mayor of the major urban hub of the county, having regular interactions with decisions being made by Berkshire Regional Transportation is an important aspect of providing expanded access for transportation.
All right, and the next question. Linda, in November, a man was shot in the Big Y parking lot. In July, there were 2 reported shootings, one ending a 25-year-old boy's life, and last week in a middle school student brought a gun to Herberg. How will you reduce gun access and violence in Pittsfield?
This is a really great question, and we've been talking a lot about this issue all throughout this campaign. And one of the things that I know for sure is that this is something that weighs heavily on the minds of everyone in our community: students, parents, young professionals who are thinking about how do they live in a community with these challenges. And these are challenges. And there's opportunities here for us to be really creative about how we evolve our law enforcement community. And it's urgent. And it's very serious. We will not be able to do any other thing in our community to evolve jobs, economy, education, new young professionals, until we have a community that is safe. Whether it's real or perceived doesn't matter. The bottom line is that we have serious issues of crime and violence in our city, and it needs to be a multi-pronged approach to how we address it. First and foremost, we need more police officers. We have not been aggressive in how we properly staff our police officers. We need more patrolmen on the streets. This is a significant issue, and it is something that I believe the people of Pittsfield are now willing to invest in. Along with that, we need to begin examining new strategies for how we provide law enforcement, more community policing. That's an important aspect of relationship building between the police and the people that they're serving and that they're protecting. It's a relationship building style of law enforcement. One of the things that I think is really important for future policing is a dedicated traffic bureau. Now, it may seem like, well, why are we, chasing down speeders when we have gun violence? Well, while we're in the process of addressing traffic violations, there may also be an opportunity to intervene in a crime. And I believe that it is important for us to invest our money in prevention rather than in investigation. So the policing aspect of this is very important, as well as beginning to address the underlying issues of crime and violence in our community. It is a public health issue just as much as it is a public safety issue.
All right. Mayor Bianchi?
Thank you very much. The same question was asked of President Obama. What would you do to stem the wave of violence that's across the country in the remaining days that you're in office? And his response was, I don't know. But what he did say is he said, we have to intervene in these violent activities. As a nation, it's unacceptable. And as a community, it's unacceptable. He went on to say, though, that there's nothing more dangerous than a young man with a gun, and in many cases an illegal gun. Now, I've become a part of the mayors, it's a national movement, Mayors Against Illegal Handguns, and they are trying different efforts. But what the president said is that you have to mentor these kids. You have to intervene in violent activity. And we've done that here in the city of Pittsfield. I applied for, shortly after becoming mayor, for a Shannon grant, and we started the Community Connection Program. And that does just that. We have trained 40 volunteers to work with a small staff of paid experts to work with young people. And now we have a number of young people in the city of Pittsfield who now have mentors and are steering them away from a violent choice. And I think that that's an incredibly effective way to do it. You cannot arrest your way out of this problem. This is a societal issue. We have to encourage parents to become involved, to understand what their children are doing and how they're exposed to guns and violence in the street. But I think that the Community Connection Program, which as I said, we've acquired a $300,000 grant, is probably the most effective thing that we can do. As far as community policing, I've opened up 3 community centers throughout the city of Pittsfield, one in our Dower Square area, which has been a problem over the years. We've brought out programming for those folks. We've made people who have felt disenfranchised a part of our community. And we have police that visit out there. We have medical screening, and now you're seeing a change. Over the last year, police calls to Dower Square is down by 15%. Arrests are down by 40%. Socialization is up. Damage to the facilities is down. We're having a real effect. But we're approaching it, I think, from a smart approach. We're approaching it addressing the societal issues underlying violence. And with a good education system and with 21st century grant programs in our middle school, we can get these youngsters with mentors, put them into an educational path that's going to allow them to have a better future. It's going to give them an education that's meaningful.
Sorry to cut in. All right. And so I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to go into the audience questions. So the last one is, Mayor Bianchi, how will you address Pittsfield's rapidly decaying infrastructure in a way that is both economically and environmentally responsible?
Can I ask a point of clarification? How are you defining infrastructure?
Roads, students brought up roads as an issue. They brought up the Taconic building. They've brought up just kind of like the buildings in town, how things kind of look.
Thanks.
Rough.
Got it. Well, first of all, the Taconic project had been stalled for years. And when I first became mayor, the treasurer of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts came to Pittsfield and said, Mayor, other places have started after you in their planning and have already had a new high school built. We've got to get this off the dime. And that's exactly what I did. And within 2 years, we will have a new Taconic High School to replace the one that's decaying. As far as other infrastructure is concerned, we also have sewer and water, which a lot of people don't think about. But we have a periodic program of renewing the sewer and water system here in the city of Pittsfield, and we do several miles a year, and we take care of that infrastructure. But another thing that I initiated was a pavement management program. We all drive on the roads, and we all understand that they do decay. But the pavement management program that we put in place is a scientific approach to taking care of the city streets. We now have all of the streets evaluated, and we are effectively repairing those streets. This year alone, we worked on 57 streets in the city of Pittsfield. We have done more work in the last year than has what occurred in the last 2 administrations in City Hall. So we're taking the money that we do have, spreading it and investing it wisely in our roads. And if you drive around Pittsfield today, I think you'd agree that the roads throughout the city are in much better shape than they were. And that's because we have a scientific, makes sense approach to paving our roads. We're taking the politics out of paving, as I like to say, and making it more effective. So even though we have limited resources, we're making those resources go a long way.
Thank you. And Linda?
Thank you very much. One of the things that I've spoken quite a bit about throughout this campaign is the condition of blight that we are experiencing in our city. And this goes right back to one of our most important initiatives, which is job creation and inspiring people to want to live and work here in the city. And when we talk about inspiring that kind of investment, when you have a potential company that wants to relocate here to our city, they're not going to announce that they're coming to visit us. They're going to come in a really stealth way. They're going to fly into our new airport, which we spent millions of dollars to upgrade, and then they'll get in a car and they'll drive down through our main streets and down through some of our neighborhoods and maybe make their way to the William Stanley Business Park, which is the premier site that Pittsfield has long held out as being our next future economic development parcel. And on their way down to the William Stanley Business Park, they're going to pass by what have become vacant, blighted, abandoned buildings. And when these business developers come to our community and they see that we haven't cared enough about ourselves to address these conditions, then why should they invest in our community? I propose that we make a significant and coordinated effort with all the city's agencies to begin addressing these conditions of blight, both in our neighborhoods and in our commercial centers. If we expect others to invest in us, we also have to invest in ourselves, and cleaning up our act is part of that investment. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to open it up to any audience questions. Just raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over to you if anyone have any questions.
Come on, students always have questions.
The first one's always the hardest, guys.
If I may, I would like to record this answer.
Sure.
Pittsfield Mayor Dan Bianchi and City Clerk Linda Tyer. As an individual on the autistic spectrum, I was wondering what your initiatives that you would support as a city's mayor for services for the growing population of the aging out community that includes individuals like me on the autistic spectrum who are not getting government services and other learning differences also included in this.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, autism is a phenomenal condition. And I knew nothing about it when I became mayor. But I've learned an awful lot about it since then. And I've learned that there is a broad spectrum. And we really have to understand it. We have to address ways to approach it. Now, I sit on the school committee. We have many people who are on the autistic spectrum that are in our school population. We have to design individual programs of study that recognize their specific place on that spectrum and the deficiency that they may have in being able to learn. We really have to look at it on an individual basis because there are so many points on that spectrum. So I think that we've hired additional people this year. Even though we had a tight budget on the school system, we hired 4 additional people to be involved in understanding the spectrum, understanding the individual's needs. And now, as I travel around to the different schools, I see kids with various points of autism being taught specifically or being on a path, an educational programming path that really is effective for them. We have to do everything we can to mainstream and coordinate our educational curriculums for those folks that are on the autistic spectrum. But it's an incredible number. I was stunned by the number of people who are on the spectrum. It's 1 in 88 people have some form of autism or on that spectrum. So it's going to be incumbent upon us to learn more about the condition, to put money into research, which is at a much higher level than the city, but at the city level, to recognize that and to design curriculum so that those kids can be mainstreamed.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And this is certainly, there is a growing body of evidence on autism and the various spectrums of autism that are now part of our culture and part of our community. And we need to be cognizant of how we plan for our future around the unique characteristics of students and community with autism. There are some very unique programs that are being developed by one of our local educational institutions, Hillcrest Educational Centers, is developing some very unique programs to address this specific issue. I think it's important for the Pittsfield Public Schools to partner with those educational institutions who are creating these unique programs so that we can be better informed about what are the new emerging trends and how we can best educate our students with autism. And another piece about it that's really important is once the student leaves the educational environment and the structure of a routine of an academic school placement program, is how do we prepare them for community living and how do we give them access to job training in a way that meets their unique learning style. We want every person, regardless of their special, unique learning styles, to be successful in school and then successful in the community as well. So there needs to be this, growing opportunities for job training for students after they leave the academic environment.
Next question.
Yeah, a really quick question on, so SABIC is leaving next year, and do you plan on any of you offering, I don't know, subsidies or something to bring in bigger businesses to create more jobs?
That's a great question, and the SABIC leaving our community is really devastating news for many families. It is a consequence that is upsetting to their lives. They're now looking at potential job loss. They're looking at relocation. So the immediate impact to the families and the employees of SABIC is something that is heartfelt for me. The long-term consequences of that on our community is significant in ways that might not always come to mind right away. For example, the effect that it will have on our real estate market is significant. Our housing values are going to decline, which also means that our ability to raise revenue so that we can provide innovative innovative, new, modern government for the people who live here will be, challenged. Now, it's important to note that there are many sort of economic development tools that Pittsfield can be using to recruit new business or to grow businesses that are currently here now that are successful, that might be just ready to have their own expansion. And those tools consist of an economic development fund that's available to new businesses or existing businesses for expansion purposes. But they have to meet some benchmarks and they have to meet some criteria in order to have access to that money. Good business plan, capital investment, are you going to renovate your building and make it more modern? Are you going to add broadband? If you need broadband, maybe we can provide you with the funds to do that. There's also what's called tax incentive financing, which allows a business to make a capital investment or to create new jobs, and we phase in their new their tax obligations. So it gives them a chance to manage their cash flow in a way that's more effective and allows them to expand their business. So those tools all exist, along with certain access to certain state programs that we should really be seeking as we continue to be challenged by these economic issues that are facing Pittsfield. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. And you asked about subsidies. Well, we have training dollars that can help people be retrained. The people at SABIC are very highly educated and very skilled. What we're hopeful to do is provide a better service than that. I spoke with the Secretary of Labor last week, and he said that as more information comes out about those people who will be losing their jobs, because there are a lot of people who may actually stay, work for SABIC, but do it remotely. There are others who are going to leave, and there are others who are going to be lost without a job. We have, once we learn exactly who will be staying and who will be without a job, we can then match up their skill set with the skills that are required in some of the other companies in the area. Right across the street from SABIC, they are looking for 88 engineers, electrical and otherwise, and other technical people, systems people. So we think that we're going to be able to help facilitate, with the help of the Department of Labor, to find positions for those people in a place like General Dynamics. But there are also other small, innovative companies that are trying to grow, but they may need a specialty. For example, a lot of the plastic injection molding companies in the area, they're looking for polymer scientists, polymer engineers. Well, SABIC is a plastic company. So when we find out whether or not there are any of those skill sets available with the people from SABIC, we can then facilitate moving those folks into some of those small companies. But I'm hopeful that with the funding that we do have, tax incentive financing is one of them. I set up a mayor's fund to help small companies grow, that we're going to be able to encourage small companies to grow and take on the skill sets of some of the people who may be losing their job. But I think that we are going to be very successful in helping those folks who are left behind and who find themselves without a job.
Next question.
Winter is coming, and I understand that there is a reasonable number of people who are homeless temporarily or permanently homeless in the city of Pittsfield. What can be done to, and more people than can be sheltered at this point, what can be done for these people before winter?
Great question, and one that's tremendously concerning. Now, we do have a shelter here in the city of Pittsfield. It accommodates a certain number. One of the problems with homelessness, it's how do you find out exactly who they are and the numbers? And you also have to remember that there are a lot of people, or there are not a lot, but there's a percentage of people who are homeless who may not be looking for a shelter, and they may have a mental or physical disorder that quite honestly is above my pay scale. But we have to make sure that we have shelters for those people that find themselves looking for it. Now, we've done a pretty good job with the shelter that we have at Barton's Crossing, and we've been able, with the help of very generous donors, such as Berkshire Health Systems, they came up with a $25,000 grant 2 years ago. We're able to place a lot of folks into places like Soldier Run. But the real challenge is finding out who they are, the numbers, and then getting them into a shelter. There's a number of smaller shelters as well that are more privately operated, and if we can work with those folks and accommodate a placement into those shelters, into the Barton's Crossing shelter, or into Soldier On, I think we were pretty successful last year in making sure that everybody was safeguarded, was fed, but it is a societal challenge that quite frankly tugs at my heart, and one that it demands a lot of attention and understanding.
Certainly, there is just not enough room for meeting the needs of the homeless community. And some of the challenges within the shelters are how do we provide the right kind of shelter environment for men and women to reside together in a shelter in a way that's safe for everyone. That's a challenge. Certainly providing there's a number of organizations who work towards ending homelessness. And I think that the city of Pittsfield needs to be engaged in this on a level where we're addressing it from a public health issue. These are our citizens who are struggling in some way to find shelter. And to an earlier question, who may have food insecurity. So certainly we as a government can find some creative ways to collaborate with the agencies that are sort of working in silos and maybe aren't partnering as well as they could be, to be the hub for creating the overarching issue of addressing homelessness. That this is a challenge that many communities face, and I think with some creative collaborations and bringing together all of the groups that are trying to answer this question, we can really be more effective when we pool our resources rather than having all these individual silos of people working towards addressing the problem.
PCB contamination that is in the soil around it and even around the community that may not have been in the river or in Silver Lake. Obviously, GE has taken some measures to clean it up, but there are definitely still issues, and we also have pollution coming from drain water, storm water, and all of that. As mayor, how do each of you propose to continue to address this problem?
That is a really great question. And Pittsfield, sadly, has a long history of suffering from a lack of concern for our environment. We were left behind by General Electric when they left our community, and they left behind a significant issue of pollution specifically for our city. When I served on the City Council, I was the chair of the Public Health and Safety Subcommittee. And one of the concerns that was raised during my tenure was how do we handle what is this, these two facilities known as Hill 71 or Hill 78 and Building 71. And these are facilities where we have planted contaminated soil that we dredged from our river. They're in a hill, and they're in a building, and they're in the heart of our city. And this is a decision that was made by people prior to my tenure, which has left behind this legacy of pollution. One of the things I did as the chair of the Public Health and Safety Committee was to ensure that we brought together, there was some work being done in these two locations near an elementary school, and the parents of the kids at the school were wondering what was going on, knowing that this was polluted soil. So we brought together the agencies responsible and held a number of forums. And over the course of those forums, we learned that there was no planned strategic method for monitoring these two polluted sites. So with the work of my subcommittee, engaging with the EPA and the DEP, we established air monitoring and water monitoring for these two polluted sites so that we would, in perpetuity, and at the expense of General Electric, understand what were the conditions of these two polluted sites, so that if we saw spikes in elevated spikes in air quality or water quality related to PCBs, we could pivot quickly and respond, rather than finding out 15 years from now that suddenly these sites are exposing us to greater pollutants.
Thank you.
So that was an important work that I did as the Public Health and Safety Chair.
I think you asked, what are we going to do going forward with the Housatonic River? What are we going to do with stormwater remediation?
Yes, that's what I asked.
Exactly. You know that the EPA came out with a decision. Over the next 2 years, there's going to have to be a cleanup of the Housatonic River from 2 miles south of the center of the city, right out to the Long Island Sound. When I became mayor, I decided there was strength in numbers and entered into a compact with the 5 other communities between here and the Massachusetts border to work with one voice to intervene with any decision-making that was made. Now, the EPA has decided that there is going to be a cleanup. My concern is that we do it without destroying the character of the river and without disrupting the people who live off of East New Lenox Road and in the polo grounds, the streets on the other side of the river. So the real trick is going to be able to effectively reduce the contaminants in the river, and there's a certain percentage of reduction that's being suggested by the EPA, but doing it in such a way that is not disruptive to those 2 communities, but also to recognize that there's going to be an economic impact, and we want to pursue the economic impact so that we can be paid for that disruption. Now, as far as the stormwater pollution is concerned, that's a big concern, especially around the William Stanley Business Park. To clean it up in one fell swoop would be probably in the neighborhood of $35 to $40 million. I'm suggesting that we take intermediate action, as we have done in other places, to have retention ponds and monitor the affluent that goes into those retention ponds, and then determine a way to clean those ponds as opposed to cleaning the whole storm water system.
Yeah.
So I think there's a way of effectively managing it and doing it in a cost-effective manner. But the real challenge is going to be the rest of the river.
Next question.
Hi. We covered a lot of important topics today, but I do think there's one that seems to always fall through the cracks. We talked about the homeless and the food shelters and all that. But we have people who are coming to school and trying to work jobs and are on limited incomes. We have families that both people are working and trying to pay for daycare and just can't afford housing. I happen to know a family of 5 who was denied shelter because they were too big a family. And yet they both work, and one is a college student. And they are actually divided and living in 2 different places with friends because they cannot find housing. My question is there any way we can work with local homeowners, some kind of incentive to give these people an opportunity to, okay, you've had a rough time, you're both working, you're going to school, and give them the opportunity to rent an apartment at an affordable price where they can live and not have to move because they moved in and can't afford heat and they don't have the food. I think we have a lot of lower income families who are just above homeless but aren't quite high enough to survive on their own, that aren't making it. And I think it's a shame, and I think if we could work with people, homeowners, and give them some kind of incentive to say, don't be so tough, let's let these people have a chance. I don't know. I just feel there's that gap there, and there's a lot of us out there.
It's a great question. In fact, I recently met with a young woman who is living in a Pittsfield Housing Authority neighborhood who is in a similar situation. She and her husband have 4 children, and they're living in a small apartment where she and her husband and her 2 twins are sharing a room, and then her 2 other children have the other rooms. And part of their challenge is that he is working full-time. She is at home raising the kids, preparing them for school, and making herself available to their needs as their kids are growing. His challenge is if he wants to work extra hours to provide better economic prosperity for their family, their food benefits are impacted. So there's this constant challenge between how do I push myself past the limits of my economic challenge versus, losing benefits that I need to keep my family fed and sheltered. So I understand and appreciate the challenge that many of these families are facing. I think one of the things that I'm really interested in doing, and it goes back to this issue that I mentioned earlier about blight in our neighborhoods in particular, is we have a number of neighborhood properties that are in a condition of blight, maybe still salvageable, but with the right developer. And part of what I want to do is take our local business housing developers who have been successful in their trade on a tour of our city and give them challenge them to find the next housing development opportunity for them. And we could certainly look at how do we provide housing opportunities through this development program for families that who are challenged by these issues of economic prosperity versus, how do we push ourselves past our economic challenges. So there's really in these challenges there's also great potential, and also many of the things that our families are being challenged by are set up by state laws and state eligibility income requirements that maybe need to be adjusted. And that's another important conversation that the local community can have with its Berkshire delegation.
Yeah, that is a real challenge, and you have painted a picture that's tough to see beyond, because there aren't a lot of programs. We hope that the Pittsfield Housing Authority can be accommodating, and they try to be. And for those folks, such as the family that you've described, refer them to my office, because I would love to work with the Pittsfield Housing Authority. They do have units that can accommodate families, and they adjust the rent based on their ability to pay. So I think that's probably the absolute best approach, because there are units that are going unfilled. There's not a real long waiting list. And there are people who are leaving the Housing Authority facilities all the time. I'm thinking of the Wilson Housing Project. That has tremendous potential. It's well run. It takes a lot of the maintenance issues off the shoulders of folks that you have, such as the family that you've described. But we've got an awful lot of units that are privately owned here in the city of Pittsfield, and because of regulations, we've made it so difficult that a lot of people just decide they're not going to rent. And I think that we've got to be more creative as far as permitting is concerned, and as far as regulations are concerned, to encourage those private citizens who may be living in a double to open up. I also think that the community of churches and the congregation of churches here in the city, and I've attended a number of meetings, could be a great source of help and hope for those folks. Not just with finding them housing, but being almost a mentor, being people of compassion, who help folks. And I know that we've done it in my parish. My wife and I started an organization there to help folks who are just having a tough time making ends meet. So it's an issue that I think needs compassion. It needs a community approach. So thank you for asking that question.
All right, we have time for one last question.
Thanks. So I'm a parent of a student in the city here, and so this morning's news has me a little concerned that there's a real lack of communication about the gun at Herberg when the mayor and the chief and the superintendent and the DA all say different things about whether or not the gun was loaded, which I'm not so sure is of utmost importance. There was a gun in the school, and that's what's important. And so I guess my question is, maybe my confidence level amongst these upper level constituents, the players in our city, if there's such a lack of communication about whether the gun was loaded and one's saying they said it this way and they're not even sure who initially wrote the original press release, then how can I be secure or confident in knowing that you're all meeting and talking about what you're going to do so that this doesn't happen again?
Yeah. And I think that's the important thing, is to address how do we proceed going forward. You're right. It was a dangerous situation. Whether the clip was in the gun or not in the gun is almost irrelevant. I got a call almost immediately. I went down to the school, walked in. The child had already left. The police had already left with the gun. We hadn't seen it. It was the superintendent's understanding, and he wrote that piece of it, that it wasn't loaded. That's irrelevant. That was a very dangerous situation. So we followed the protocol, and we removed the child, removed the gun as soon as it was known to be there. As far as your confidence level, I don't think it should be shaken because of that one piece of inaccuracy. The fact of the matter is, we have to do a better job. We have to encourage families to be involved. I would suspect that that student probably will never be coming back to the school. I can't imagine it. However, if it means that we have to make an investment like New York City does and have metal detectors, we'll do that. But I would like to think that we can encourage families to be more involved, to encourage parents to understand what their kids are leaving the home with, to understand whether or not the child even has a gun. It is just disconcerting. But we've got to, and we can't be parents. Only parents can do that job. We can only encourage them. And I think with time, with the mentoring programs, with the community connection program, we're going to intervene with those youngsters. As President Obama said, there's nothing more dangerous than a 14 or 15-year-old with a weapon. It's a societal issue that we've got to address. We've got to be methodical about it, and we've got to be consistent with it. But as far as the immediate, the immediate concern, yeah, it's concerning. And as a school committee, we should talk about: do we tighten up protocols? Do we invest $1 million in metal detectors? Perhaps. It's a sad commentary, but I can't say enough about encouraging families to be responsible for their children. In the long term, we are going to have positive effect with the Community Connections Program and the mentoring program. But in the meantime, families have got to step up.
Well, I think that there is no way to diminish the seriousness of what occurred at our middle school. This was a very upsetting incident for parents, and to have this confusing communication just sort of elevates the anxiety around what is really happening. And when we can't rely on the information that's being given to us, it again elevates the anxiety. So, this is not the first time that we've found guns in our schools. This has become the most serious public safety challenge in our city, and we have to look at it seriously. I understand the point about involving families, but that's not the reality for every home. Not every home has those structures in place where there's this level of monitoring. Now, one of the things that I want to understand is, What is the consequence to the parent from a legal standpoint when their child brings a weapon to school? What type of investigation happens so that there's a legal consequence to the parent? Were these guns illegally possessed by the parents? Are they guns that are properly licensed? And if so, we should revoke the license and remove the guns from the home. There needs to be a comprehensive approach every time we are faced with this challenge. I spoke to a mother of the Herberg, of a student at Herberg, who said to me, I don't want to have to rely on the courage of another child to report that there's a gun in school. So these are real serious issues, and it needs to be at the forefront of our planning for an effective law enforcement community. Thank you for the question.
All right, so that concludes everything. So I'd just like to thank Mayor Bianchi and Linda Tyer for coming today. They were here last night, and it was a late night, so we really appreciate them coming. And make sure you turn out on November 3rd and vote in the election.